This month's SBE Webxtra is brought to you by Wheatstone, maker of the intelligent IP audio network used by studios around the globe. The AES-67 compatible WheatNet IP intelligent network is the most comprehensive end-to-end studio network system in the world, with a full line of consoles, software apps, IP audio appliances, and third-party add-ons for any studio workflow, size, or purpose. Wheatstone. Well, good afternoon. I'm Chris Scherer, Member Communications Director of the Society of Broadcast Engineers and the co-host of this month's episode of the SBE Webxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. This is a monthly SBE meeting usually held the third Monday of the month. The SBE is the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals with about 5,000 members, mostly in the U.S., but also around the world. The host of today's SBE Webxtra is SBE board member Kirk Harnack, who is also the chair of the SBE Social Networking Committee. Hey, Kirk.
Hi, Chris. Thanks very much. Appreciate you being here, and welcome into the SBE Webxtra, the meeting on the web every month. Hey, we have a great guest this week. We'll get to our guest in a few minutes, but I'll just highlight and preview for you. It's Wayne Pecena. He's the president-elect of the SBE. He'll be signed in. He'll be sworn in as president in just a few weeks at our meeting in Madison, Wisconsin. But before we get to Wayne, Chris has a great member update for us. And Chris, what do we need to know this week?
Sure. Here's your SBE member update for September 16, 2019. As you've seen by now, the SBE election is complete, and as Kirk just noted, Wayne Pecena has been elected to be the next president of the SBE. The elected officers and directors will be sworn in at the SBE National Meeting in Madison, Wisconsin on October 16. The SBE National Meeting is being held in conjunction with the Broadcasters Clinic, a presentation of the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and the SBE chapters of Wisconsin. The clinic runs October 15 to 17, and you can get all the details on the clinic at wi-broadcasters.org. That's the Wisconsin Association of Broadcasters website. The SBE National Meeting runs October 15 and 16, and all the events are at the Marriott Madison West in Middleton, Wisconsin. That's a suburb of Madison. On October 15, the Certification Committee and SBE Board of Directors meet. On October 16, SBE events include the annual SBE Fellows Breakfast, the SBE Membership Meeting, which will be streamed live, and the SBE National Awards Reception and Dinner. All the details are on the SBE website at sbe.org. This past April in Las Vegas, the SBE presented a day-long seminar on implementing ATSC 3.0 for the PBS TechCon. Those presentations were recorded, and all 6 parts are now available for on-demand viewing. They're available through Webinars by SBE, and you can purchase each video a la carte, or if you have SBE Member Plus, they are included, completely included with that optional membership. If you paid the registration to attend the seminar in Las Vegas, you were sent emails on how you can also view them. That's Webinars by SBE. And speaking of webinars, we have several of them coming up. On Thursday, September 19, RF 201 Module 7, which is about FM filters and FM combiners. Tom Silliman, the president of ERI, and Nicholas Paulin will cover the types of filters and discuss commonly used technologies for emissions control and channel combining for shared antenna systems. On Wednesday, September 25, the fundamentals of SNMP Part 1. Here's a new one. Wayne Pecena, I know that guy, is presenting this webinar, and he will provide a familiarity with SNMP fundamentals, beginning with consideration to a network management system architecture and system components. On Wednesday, October 23, we have RF 201 Module 8, AM Multiplexed Antenna Systems. Tom King, the president and CEO of Kintronic Labs, presents this AM multiplexing webinar that covers the feasibility criteria for multiplexing 2 or more AM stations. Basic isolation filter designs and tower feed methods for improved audio bandwidth of multiplexed AM stations will also be covered. For all of these and more, go to sbe.org/webinars and get all the details. On the certification side, if you want to take an SBE certification exam, there is at least one date coming up that you should know about. The November exam window will be November 1 to 11, and that application deadline is September 24. Go to sbe.org/certification and get all the details on that. And that's your SBE member update for September 16, 2019.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much. Just like the beginning of a SBE meeting here in Nashville, but very complete. You do a great job. Anyway, you could come down to Nashville and do our announcements.
Well, I'll think about it. You going to cover my ticket?
I'll cover your meal.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. All right. As Chris mentioned, we've got a new board of directors to be sworn in and a new SBE president, as well as other executive committee members. But let's meet, if you haven't already, and I think you probably have, meet Wayne Pecena, the president-elect of the SBE. Wayne, welcome in. How are you?
Oh, good afternoon. Thanks. Glad to be here.
So, Wayne, you served for a short time as vice president, but I've known you for a while as the elected secretary of the SBE. Tell us a little bit about your previous roles, and then we'll get into what's going to happen when you are sworn in as president.
Okay. Well, I have been a board member for several years, and through at least a re-election cycle of that, I became a secretary, first appointed as secretary when Tim Anderson resigned from the board a few years back. And I served as secretary for, probably 2, maybe 3 years there. And once again was appointed to the vice president role upon R.J. Russell's resignation to take on the frequency coordination manager duties, and I guess probably served one of the shortest vice president tenures of around. And then, of course, it's election time, and ended up on the ballot for president.
So, Wayne, the process of becoming elected, you ran unopposed, and in the SBE and a lot of other organizations, that's kind of a normal thing. But to those of us not understanding that, why are there a number of positions that typically, not every time, but typically are unopposed on the ballot?
Well, I think most of the positions where you have multiple candidates tends to be in the board positions. Once, at least, again, from looking at the past, once you reach one of the officer positions, there certainly has historically not been a lot of opposition there in candidates. Certainly there is there can be candidates, and I guess probably if you did look through the past, I'm sure there have been times where there have been multiple candidates, but I think a lot has to do with actually any of the SBE positions, whether it's an officer position or a board member position. It requires a pretty substantial commitment from an individual, both in certainly time as well as sometimes some financial resources to support that. And as a result, a lot of times that does not result in a lot of competing candidates, so to speak.
Gotcha. Having been on the board now for a few years myself, and I had a term when I was not on the board, it occurs to me that the last several presidents we've had of SBE have each had pretty aggressive and dynamic agendas that they wanted to put forth to help the SBE not only maintain but to grow. And I've been really impressed with Jim Leifer, with his leadership. But your leadership style may be different, and you may have some different ideas. Wayne, what can you tell us about what you might have plans regarding building on what your predecessors have done in terms of leadership and programs versus what you might have ideas to do that are a little bit different than what we've been used to?
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, I think it is important to build upon the leadership of the previous president, particularly under President Leifer. I think one of the more significant initiatives began, and that was our strategic planning conference that occurred about a year ago. And from that became several task groups that were organized, and those were organized to really look in depth at specific areas that were identified through the strategic planning process. And some of those, well, even here today, this Webxtra telecast is the chapter of the web that began from the strategic planning and the task group. That's one of the more immediate ones. Several other of those initiatives are longer in terms of time frame to implement and get going, and certainly those are important, I feel, to build upon and carry through, or in other words, see those task groups and those initiatives and recommendations come to fruition, because I think we're looking, they're important to the future of the SBE. Far as my own thoughts and idea, really, it's just, I think, more to focus on the kind of what I consider the core initiatives and services of the SBE. Primarily, that is in certification, that is in education, and frequency coordination. Ensure that those services evolve and change. Certainly our industry has changed a lot, will continue to change, and with that, those support services and functions that SBE provides to the membership, those likely need to change too, to keep up with the changing times.
If our producer can pop a slide up regarding the task groups, that would be really cool. I know he's a little bit over it. Oh yeah, there we go. So Wayne, now that we have this on the screen, maybe you could talk about these task groups and what's going on with them.
Sure. Well, the task group number one is the one that I think I can speak the best about, because I am the chair of that task group, where we're looking at, as the title might suggest, is expanding the membership scope of the SBE. If you look overall at the SBE membership, Chris had mentioned in his introduction, we're 5,000 and so members. That membership also is relatively flat. Unfortunately, we lose some members each year due to one aging membership, but again, we also attract new members. So we're looking at ways to be sure that our membership is being provided services and that meets their needs. Again, certification, education are some of those areas we're looking at. But as also our byline suggests, an organization of multimedia and broadcast engineers, we're looking to engage, let's say, outside of what might be considered some of our traditional broadcast engineer roles. And that is particularly what that task group focused on. And we'll be forthcoming with a recommended course of action for the board meeting coming up this October. And I guess based upon either the adoption or rejection or modification, we'll see where that goes. Looking ahead, though, at several of the other, such as expanding member participation, public relations and marketing, looking at our mission, looking at our branding and so forth, and all the way down to, say, task group number 5, which is looking at things such as our social media engagement, maybe the creation of a SBE app for your smartphone, and the real biggie that I think is probably one of the most important ones is a refresh of our website, which has become a little stale and dated, and it is certainly, I think, time for a more modern look. But also with that, there's been several additional levels of service and functionality that has been proposed. So again, these task groups are looking again really at the SBE today, where the SBE needs to be in 3 to 5 years down the road, and identifying ways in which to achieve that in terms of implementation.
Wayne, I'm wondering about the difference organizationally between a task group and a committee. Can you help me understand that?
Well, I think the idea of the task group really is more to kind of become the examine, research, and make recommendations, whereas the committees certainly have an ongoing part in that process. In fact, committee members also serve on the task groups in which to support, but then the committees, these standing committees really become more of the implementer of those recommendations and the implement those new services, those new products, and so forth that come about.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Understand. So the task force are they may last a while, but they are temporary, whereas committees are ongoing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, we do certainly have our standing committees that have been with us for a long time. We also have some new, at least one new committee that was created, and that was the Technologies Committee. But again, those are ongoing, standing groups of individuals that are both board members as well as our peers throughout the SBE membership that serve on the committees. In other words, they're not necessarily, often they're chaired by a board member. Again, often, not always, but we have members that are our peers throughout the membership ranks. And you're right, the task committees, they have a kind of a charge or a function. And once that goal has been achieved, those recommendations may be made, then that effectively, that task group is sunset, so to speak. And I think some will have shorter durations than others. For instance, the website is one of the more complex ones. Whereas it may seem pretty simple to gin up a new website, there's a lot more involved, and particularly in the SBE website with the what I call some of the back end stuff or the back office function and all the databases that is involved in managing that. That's where things become complicated, and likely we'll see that come in phases, and a result that task committee might stay engaged a little bit longer than some of the others.
You know, I've built a few websites and they've all been pretty simple ones. And I know that once you get into the world of databases, passwords and things like that, and keeping track of individuals' progress as has been proposed for the new website, it does get complicated and it does get expensive. It's no longer just a few HTML5 pages. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And you think about, again, some of the many areas we take for granted. For instance, you go to register for the awards reception and dinner in Madison coming up next month, and you go through that process and you get to enter your credit card number. Well, that sounds pretty straightforward and simple, and all websites take credit cards for payment for services, but actually implementation of that can be very complex and a lot of regulatory engagement because you're dealing with credit card information. So again, it's a complex process, and so as I think Jim Leifer had pointed out, one of the best attributes of a president is to have patience, and with that, again, we hope to actually move some of these items along that really began under Jim's leadership and direction, is actually bring those to reality.
Wayne, coming up in the second half of our meeting here today, we're going to talk about education and webinars. And I think you have some really good things to say about those. And also we've got a quote from a past president we're going to look at that slide after we come back. Chris Scherer, let's toss it back to you, sir.
And I almost had forgot to unmute. My turn this time around. The SBE Webxtra is made possible by the generous support of our sponsor, and that's Wheatstone. The SBE Webxtra will be right back.
Yeah, TOPs, that's got to be one of the largest newsrooms in America, for that matter.
Maybe the world. 50 news positions, plus a lot of the editing booths and everything else they have. It's definitely unique.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about us supplying hardware. There was a lot of services. There was custom software. There was never a financial target. It was all about the workflow. Behind the scenes, Hubbard, DC, and Chicago are doing something very unique, and that is a redundant form of networking called LACP, which was redundant links to all of their edge switches in the studio. We had 2 links going from every single core switch, and we tested that here. We had all of their hardware, we took all of their networking stuff, we fully assembled it here at the Wheatstone test facility.
Yep.
And we proved that it will actually work for IP audio. So there was a pretty big breakthrough just with that on the whole networking side with the Cisco stuff.
And again, we want to thank the sponsor of the SBE Webxtra, Wheatstone. As you saw on the spot, Wheatstone recently worked on the new facilities for WTOP. You can learn more about that at wheatstone.com/WTOP. And now we go back to Kirk and Wayne talking about President-elect Wayne Pecena's plans and goals for his coming term as SBE president.
Wayne, a lot of us have seen shifts in careers and career requirements. I mean, more and more radio stations, broadcast facilities look more like an IT data center than they do a broadcast facility. Sure, we still have microphones. TV stations still have cameras and remote trucks, but so much of the video and the audio are handled in the IT domain. My next question for you is, how do you see the SBE squaring with or assisting its members in shifts in career and job requirements?
Well, certainly, as our industry has continues to change, as we've all experienced, in some ways the SBE has to change as well. And particularly, I'd mentioned our continuing education or professional development is really one of our key programs that is provided to members. So with that, those programs have to change. In other words, the offerings. And if you, I think, look back over at least part of my tenure, the education has been one of the passions for me. And a lot of that has come about in the areas of IT topics, particularly with IP networking. Many people that know me from maybe a webinar, an Ennis workshop, or some presentation that they attended where I was a presenter, and most likely I was speaking about some aspect of IP networking. So that's been a big initiative. As several years ago, obviously the SBE identified there is this coming change or this shift in the knowledge base that the broadcast engineer is going to need looking ahead, and we brought forth programs with that, and that still continues. If you look at a lot of the ongoing webinars, you'll also notice that they're now series rather than a standalone individual webinar. They're more in terms of a multi-part series, simply because the material to be presented is a lot more complex, and you certainly cannot address everything that needs to be covered, let's say, in your typical 1 hour, maybe an hour and a half webinar. So as a result, you have these multi-part webinars. As Chris mentioned in his introduction, I believe it was part 7 of the advanced RF webinar series is coming up. And good example again of the need that is identified for more advanced information, and a webinar series created to address that. You'll see similar things in the ATSC3 webinar series that is now, gosh, up to maybe part 5 or 6, and that again is envisioned to be a multi-part webinar series that will go on as ATSC3 advances. So again, overall, it's just another part of the SBE changing as the industry changes, and being there with the right type of content delivered in the right form, whether it be webinar, whether it be personal presentations, or whatever the medium may be.
You know, we make a kind of a big deal out of new webinars that are coming down the pike, and of course we would. It's new information, hasn't been put out there before, or at least not by us, not by the SBE, and not in the format that we're doing it. But something that I find so valuable is the fact that these webinars are still all online. It's not that you have just one chance to watch it or one chance to maybe surreptitiously record it. The SBE keeps them online, and if you are an SBE Plus member, you have access to all of those webinars, and the technology that is contained in those webinars for the most part isn't changing, or isn't changing very quickly. In other words, it's fundamentals that we give in the webinar. Can you speak to that a bit in your webinars, how you make sure that we're talking about fundamentals and not little specifics that could be different in a couple of years from now with a different piece of gear, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you make a really good point, Kirk, about the library of webinars that are available. My last count of those was here, gosh, just a few weeks ago, in preparation of my next Signal article submission, and there's well over 70 individual webinars that make up that library. If you look at most of them, you're right. They are dealing with fundamentals of maybe broadcast engineering, fundamentals of electronics, in my case, the fundamentals of IP networking. And that technology is with us to say, yes, products and services and features are going to change, will continue to change, but those fundamentals remain. And at least in the particular webinars that I have reduced, I've really tried to focus primarily on the fundamentals and understanding the terminology, understanding the acronyms that are often involved with any technical topic. And once you get past understanding the acronyms, a lot of things start to fall together, or understanding the proper context of an acronym that often can have different meanings depending on how it is implied or what the conversation is. And with that, you know, if someone, for instance, is looking for an IP networking let's say webinar to walk someone through configuration of a Cisco switch, that's probably not where some of my webinars will take you, although in some of the advanced ones, I do use configuration examples. I have always tried to use Cisco products because that's probably what I personally know the best. And I also tend to try to use HP products with the idea between those two product lines that represents the terminology that the industry use, and with the idea someone, yes, they're going to have a different brand, but understanding those fundamentals, then you can adapt to the specifics.
You know, I got to refer to one of my favorite resources, and that is the SBE Broadcast Engineering Handbook. And I didn't write anything that's in the current edition. I did write I edited and wrote a chapter in the NAB's Broadcast Engineering Handbook. In looking through, and I bought a copy. It was kind of a challenge, and I ended up buying a copy of the engineering handbook, as I said I would live on the show. I was delighted with that purchase. That Jerry Whitaker, who's been well known in the industry as the editor of the SBE Engineering Handbook, and I just got to put a plug in for it. It's available for the SBE store at sbe.org, and I think it's concise. It's beautiful. It ain't cheap, but my goodness, it's money well spent to have reference material on your bookshelf, and you can easily put it into your head and put it to use. What comments might you have about that terrific resource?
Well, I might be just a little bit biased about that publication. I agree that it is a very good reference text that, quite honestly, every broadcast engineer should have that text on their bookshelf. It is simply a diverse, well-rounded, practical, in a lot of ways, nuts and bolts reference that covers everything from, AM antenna systems to 8 VSB transmitters. Certainly there's a chapter on IP networking in there that let's just hopefully it's okay. But again, it's a well-rounded, in-depth reference. And certainly it's probably not one of those texts that you pick up and you read from chapter 1 to the end. You read selective parts that are of interest to you, or you have an awareness of what is there when you need some specific information. You can turn to that as well.
Wayne, as incoming president, are there any other initiatives you'd like to begin or emphasize with regard to educational opportunities for broadcast engineers?
Well, not anything specific. Again, I think our challenge as the SBE, whether it is the board, the education committee, or the organization as a whole, is to simply keep providing needed resources and materials to our membership. To do that, we need also the help of our membership in terms of feedback of what is being done today, what is needed, so that we are focusing on the right things that the membership desires and needs to further them in their broadcasting career.
One of the responsibilities, I think, of members is to contribute something. Don't just take, give something back. And one of the things that people can give back, that members can give back, is encourage other engineers. Hey, are you an SBE member? I'm enjoying my membership. I get these things out of it. Hey, at least at a minimum, I get monthly camaraderie with other engineers at typically monthly SBE chapter meetings. But I think you have a slide here from a former president. You want to tell us about that?
Well, this is simply a quote that I guess I ran across a few years back, that I have used it in some of my own recruiting efforts. In simple terms, I look at it that, every broadcast engineer should be a member of the SBE. And if they are not a member, or we have someone that maybe was a member in the past and they're not today, I would like to understand why is that. And I've talked to several people like that, and I want to think that I'm starting to have some insight. And it really is, we as an organization need to be sure that we're providing the needs of all of our members. And that's an area, again, kind of my focus on the future is to look at maybe where we're not meeting someone's needs and trying to fill in that gap. And we'll thank President Theodore Roosevelt for, I think, a very timely quotation that certainly applies to the SBE.
And so different from the Groucho Marx quote being, I would never join an organization that would have me as a member.
member. Yes, very much so.
Not at all. And we do. We get stuff. We get benefits from SBE. I mean, they're pretty plentiful. And I got to tell you, the people at the home office, the executive staff, the staff members, and John Poray, the executive director, just do a wide variety of services that they make available for us. And of course, the executive committee and the committees and the task groups that we've talked about in the show do a lot too. I want to hear anything else from Chris Scherer, who is a staff member at SBE. Chris, you guys do an amazing job. And the few times that I've needed to call and ask a question or get something done, bam, there's the answer right away. You can take a bow, Chris. Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Kirk. But I'm not only a staff member, I'm a past president. I do appreciate the note of thanks, though. The one thing that I think the staff, the SBE staff, office staff really excels at, while the board and the directors, the officers set the plan and the path for the SBE, it's the national staff that's there to help ensure that those plans and actions actually are executed and carried forth. So yeah, a lot of times we're the legs behind the action. Not to say that we do all the work. The board and directors and officers certainly carry their fair share as well. But we're just part of the overall greater machine. So, but I do appreciate the thanks. I'm sure the others in the Annapolis office would agree and would appreciate the kind words as well.
Wayne, I got to ask, is there anything that we haven't gotten to cover here that you wanted to say before we let you go on this meeting?
No, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I would like to echo the comments that you've made about the office staff. The SBE staff is a relatively small group, but the amount of things, daily tasks that is done is just incredible. And I think any of the board members that have certainly chaired a committee, they realize the importance of that office staff in terms of the myriad of details that it takes to keep the chapter running. Is just it is incredible, and that staff is responsible for that.
Good deal. Wayne Pecena is president-elect of the Society of Broadcast Engineers, has been our guest. Wayne, thank you very much for taking time, especially the prep time that we went through to have you on today. I really appreciate it. And you look great and sound good too. So thanks very much.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm coming from Santa Fe, New Mexico today, a little bit out of my normal space. So thanks for the accommodations and everything to make this all work.
Wow, Santa Fe. I built a radio station there many, many years ago. I had to move out of one building and go into another. I think we were one step ahead of the sheriff.
Very good.
And the transmitter site was up at Los Alamos, almost an inaccessible part of the year, but we got there during the summertime, and wow, something else. Beautiful country there. Wayne, thanks for being with us. Chris Scherer, thank you for being with us. Would you carry us out, please, Mr. Scherer?
Absolutely. Well, this has been the SBE Webxtra for September. It's our chapter of the web, if you will. And I'm going to kind of make a side plug here. On Facebook, we have a group called SBE Chapters. And if you're an SBE member, take a look for that and ask to be joined or included into that group. We'd love to have you participate. That is a Facebook group that is ideal for chapters to post photos and information about meetings they've held, and not just all the usual routine educational forums that we typically see at meetings. I mean, you have a chapter barbecue, put some pictures up. For instance, I'm in Kansas City. We just toured the airline museum in the old downtown airport here. Absolutely nothing to do with broadcast, maybe a little avionics in there, but totally separate from what a lot of chapters normally do. So look for that on Facebook, and we hope to have you join that. Next month, the SBE National Meeting is being held in Madison, Wisconsin, as I mentioned earlier, and the membership meeting will be webcast. So look for the details on that on sbe.org, and that will also be posted on the usual social media outlets as well. So on behalf of Kirk Harnack, I'm Chris Scherer, the SBE Member Communications Director. Thanks again to Wheatstone for their support of the SBE Webxtra, and we'll see you next time.